I had a desire to learn to meditate because I was getting migraine headaches. I was treating patients in the clinic all the time. I was just feeling like there was something on the top of my head that was a ceiling that wasn't supposed to be there. I just had this sensation all the time. And then I started getting migraine headaches, and I was missing work a couple days a week just because of the pain. Now, when I would go to the clinic, I could help people with their migraine headaches, but then I would wake up, a few days later and just not be able to get out of the bed. It was so intense. Dark room, lights out, curtains drawn, that kind of state. And so I was drawn to meditate, and I was actually attempting to meditate as a means of managing a pain pattern. And so I went into this meditative, place, into a state with a group of people I had heard about, and I instantly, in these guided meditations, started having these transcendental experiences to the point that I knew that this was something here for me. And it was more than I bargained for, but I knew. And so I went a couple of times. This teacher was from out of the country, and I found out where they were going to be next and went. And about the third time that I sat down into, a meditative state, I had an instant opening to an entirely different realm. I instantly was exalted above the earth. The earth was beneath me so far, it was about the size of a marble, and I was embedded into it. I was me, but I wasn't in a body. I was a ray of light, and I was in a light so brilliantly bright, it was 10 times brighter than the brightest day in the desert that I had ever seen. And yet I wasn't trying to get away from it or shield myself from it. I just was open and in it and so incredibly free. And I could see 360 degrees, actually spherically, around me. There was a beautiful pink iridescent horizon between this brilliantly bright light and a very bright light below this horizon. And every time I took a breath, this horizon would rise like this pink iridescent blanket of something. And I knew that this light was becoming love as it was passing through this system that I was. And that every time I took a breath, the degree to which I could take a breath would determine how much of this light was moving through me, and it was coming to the planet and, feeding the planet in some way. Now, this wasn't induced by anything. It was just consciousness doing this thing. And the most important thing for me in the moment was I knew that I had always been there. This was the truth of who I was. It was like, oh, this is what's really going on. And I knew that this life in this body was something I was projecting into this other dimension as an experience to bring this light that I was into the place that this physical existence was operating as. There was nothing missing. There was nothing broken. There was nothing to become. There was nothing to achieve, to accomplish. It was wholly whole, this completely complete. And most importantly, I knew that every one of us was this, and it was reflecting of the eternal nature of who and what we truly are as presence of light coming into form, bringing the light on this frontier of consciousness, if you will, some sort. And I came down out of that experience and opened my eyes, and this teacher was sitting, in the front of the room and locked on to me with this huge smile, totally knowing, what had happened. Now, I should have set this up a little better beforehand. I was being asked to do things by this teacher. I was an achiever, and I was, trying to do everything right, and she was on to me. So she gave me a list of things to do that were literally impossible to do in the amount of time that she gave me to do them. And, at some point, I just got completely frustrated, running around behind the scenes while everybody else was here in this beautiful meditative retreat. And I finally just, put the list down, which is very unusual for me, and just walked into the room and, just said, the heck, it was a little more explicit than that, but the heck with whatever is going on. I'm just going to go sit and meditate with everybody else. And so I was claiming something for myself in a way that hadn't been the case in my life. And we were chanting, and so I was regulating all sorts of things that I now know what was happening, but I didn't at the time. I was just innocently, purely in a devotional state, trying to open up to something that was calling me very deeply. And so then I sit down and am chanting, and then boom, that's when this big opening happens. And so I knew in that moment that she knew that she got me. She broke the pattern enough that I was available, and I was surrendered into what was truly trying to happen and come through my system that I could awaken to. And so as I, as the weeks and months and years would pass, I became very devoted to discovering, unpacking, how did that happen? How do I recreate that for myself? How do I share that with others? And, what is it? What's the purpose? And what's really going on here? So it became a beautiful conversation that just started unfolding with my patients and clients. And then people started asking me to come and, speak to their groups and so on. And it has become a global conversation just based upon these openings that we can generate for ourselves. And I find that as with experiences like that, as with the science that we can study, what really matters is the wisdom to integrate them and to infuse them together. Otherwise, it's just information or something that we're seeking to try to accomplish or achieve or to acquire or to arrive at. And it's about neither. It's about all of that and you, your purpose, what you're doing here, what it is that you are here to feel into, to awaken to, and ultimately to bring into this reality as the gift that we are on this frontier that we're on. So,
so
that's a lot.
It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. I could, I imagine people listening to this maybe be like, oh, I want an experience like that. And what's interesting is that it was the lack of the I seeking for an experience that was where that experience was born out of,
Yes.
for you.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, after that experience, because when you have a truly transformative experience, like transformation is when a seed turns into a tree. Like they don't really resemble each other at all.
Yeah.
There's traces of each other in both, but one thing transmutes into another. And having a taste of your true nature that is beyond the intellect, where you viscerally feel it. The oracle in the Matrix says, "From your balls to your bones." It's like
right.
You is a true knowing.
Mm-hmm.
That changes us on contact immediately. And I think of how important creating an environment and conditions and spiritual practices in our life to get us to that point where we have that taste, the experiential knowing beyond the mind, and how that is worth infinitely more than reading 1,000 books on the topic.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. Different world.
And so I'm curious, after that process, both what do you feel like shifted in you energetically, and how did you try, if you did, to understand what happened?
After that, I was obsessed with figuring out, how did that happen and how can I do that again? I just knew that I was supposed to know that. And so it became very internal inquiry based. It was, I had one eye on the inside all the time. Every time I was working with someone, I started teaching meditation experiences for people, teaching classes, training people how to surrender into that deep space so that this could unfold. And it was very interesting. The experiences themselves didn't change me. They awakened what was possible in me in a way that I wasn't aware of. I didn't even know to try for something like that. I had friends that I was meeting that were meditators for 30 years and talking about all sorts of experiences, but I had no knowing that there was some goal that I was shooting for called enlightenment or, some kind of additional realm. I was just trying to get rid of my headaches. I was just like, whatever. I didn't know. And so having that awakening, these realizations had an impact on my perceptive field of what is possible or who we really are. But as far as it changing my headaches or healing other things that it came to heal, it wasn't until I focused on embodiment that anything actually transitioned in my life, transformed in my life in any appreciable amount, other than the fact that I was walking around with my mouth hanging open about, do you have any idea what's really going on here? Do you have any idea what's really going on here? It's like, no. So what happened was I recognized that by getting more in my body with what I now was aware of and with the frequencies that were now running more enlivened in my system, I started healing not only my headaches, but I was born with a scoliosis, and this scoliosis started healing. I started sitting in meditation. My body would start to rotate. It would just want to turn as if it wanted it to turn all the way around. So I finally figured out that I could let it turn all the way around with my consciousness, even though the physical body wasn't. But then something would unwind physically inside my system. And as the months would progress, it would vary in different levels of my body, where rotations or side bendings, or I would be in the middle of a deep state of meditation, and all of a sudden my body would just fold over, just rapidly fold over, and then want to rotate and rise up in an entirely different fashion. And I started to know what was happening. I knew that it was unwinding the distortions in the field that were there as I was born, there in my mother's womb, there as a point of my coming in to do such things that I didn't know at the time which or if both were involved, but I knew that some distortion in my own field was being corrected. And what happened was curvatures in my spine were corrected because I was allowing this breath to guide what was happening as I was in a meditative state, but learning how to be in my body at the same time. Prior to that, I would shoot up and out and go on these all sorts of exotic experiences through the ethereal realms and have all sorts of experiences happening after that initial big one. It was like the floodgates opened and I was going on a ride every time I closed my eyes, it seemed like. And yet it didn't change my life until I focused on drawing myself more deeply and anchoring myself in the body. As such, the body field began to adapt to the perfection that is occurring as it's pouring into this dimension. It was as if I was allowing that perfecting template to drop more deeply into the physical dimension because of my surrender, because of my awareness. I was raised in a family of quantum science. My father was a pioneer in energy medicine, and he was also a chiropractor. And I went to school and became a chiropractor, so I was very educated in the physiology and anatomy and the neuro function that happens in the body and natural healing. So that was my come from when all of this came together. So I was able to support what was trying to happen through me. And as a byproduct of that, I turned on a healer within my system that hadn't been enlivened before. So not only did the migraines heal, the scoliosis heal itself. Also, when I would go through an incident or an injury of some sort, I broke bones twice in the next couple of years that happened, and not big fractures, but compression fractures that would have been isolated and casted and those kinds of things. And I was able to just work right through it with yoga and meditation and without having to go through the traditional means. I feel younger. I have an endless supply of energy that is always available to share this information with people and to move through my life. And all of it is because truly I know of embodying these higher frequencies of energy on a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more of a conscious level. And that we each have the capacity to do this is the driving force in my life. I'm just compelled to share and to turn that on for people, because it's been an amazing transformation in my life.